Hello and welcome to this Making Flexible Working Work workshop. Today I'm delighted to have Flexible Working Day Ambassador Charlotte Blair from the Strength Partners, sharing with us how we can play to our strengths. And this is, I suppose, a really useful topic that we can use both in our working, if we're working in flexible teams or not, but also as part of our whole life. So thank you, Charlotte, for joining us today.
You're very welcome, Vanessa. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm super excited to be an ambassador and help others understand how flexible working can really help them, their organisations, and really why strengths matter when trying to do that, whether you're an individual contributor or a manager or a leader within the business.
Brilliant. And so I suppose leading into it straight away, why do they matter?
I think they matter because our strengths influence everything that we do. So I'm a Gallup accredited strength coach, and what that means is I'll get onto the tool itself, but it's very much coming at the lens of positive psychology. And I think all through our lives, we look at perhaps the negatives when we think about, as parents, where we typically focus on the things that we don't do so well and the gaps. And I think we found that research shows that when we focus on the positives, the outcome is different. And a lot of people don't know, what their strengths are. So we're going to talk a bit about, what strengths are. What do we mean by strengths? And I'll go into more detail about why it's important. But there's a lot of research and a lot of data behind it. And then, why it's important is because we can use them in ways, like you say, not just at work but whole life, to help us think about, well, if I'm a manager and I'm thinking of, I've got a request come in for flexible working, how might my strengths shape what I do? Because really they are a filter for the way that we see the world. And we know that, everybody sees the world in a different way. So we're going to talk about how we use them either as an individual contributor or, as a manager, but, also as a parent as well.
Brilliant.
And then I'll talk a bit about, how to find out what they are, some simple ways that you can kind of do that.
Wonderful. And look, I'm sure for you listening today, you've heard this question before at interviews. So tell us, what are your strengths? And I know interviewers are less likely to ask that question now, but certainly I've been asked it many times. So what are they? What are strengths? How do you summarise them, Charlotte?
So Gallup define a strength as, something that we do repeatedly well. But to start to kind of identify what the strength is, we have to start with a talent. We define talent as a naturally reoccurring pattern of thought, feeling and behaviour. And there's an element of nature nurture to this. So, there are some things that we're born differently. Those of us who've got, multiple kids, or even if you've got multiple siblings, go, wow, we come from the same parents. How is it that we're so different? We're all brought up, our siblings were brought up the same way, but otherwise we're born with different filters for the world. So we have that talent of how we think, feel and behave, and a strength is when you can then invest in that particular talent and recreate near perfect performance on a regular basis. So you're right, I've been asked plenty of times in an interview, and we probably do it less so now, but what are your strengths? And people really struggle to think about what they are. Well, I'm really good with Excel, or I'm really good at communicating to people. But yet when we ask people, well, what are your weaknesses? Then people can name those like really quickly. And again, because we're kind of conditioned to do that. But as strength is your natural talent used in a productive way to achieve near perfect performance.
Great. And they're important, right? So like you said, if you know what they are, you can play to them and you can maximise them. And I remember reading something, and it might have been a Gallup article, I can't recall, but it said, if you've got talent in a particular area and you do some work on that and you really embrace it, you can take that to the next level of, what would the word be?
Well, the next level of high performance. I mean, yeah, so Gallup being a research company, they're one of the most well-known companies for research. They've researched millions and millions of people all over the world. In fact, over 20 million people now have taken the Clifton Strength Finder assessment, which is the tool that I work with. So when we think about how do we identify what they are, then that's my favorite tool to kind of do it. But yeah, the research they found, people who have the opportunity to use their strengths are over 3 times as likely to report having a great quality of life, or over 6 times more likely to be engaged in their jobs. And then, we'll see in a minute some of the details that I've got about the impact that it can have on teams and organizations by identifying them and leveraging them, the impact it can have on profitability and productivity as well. So that they're super important. The return on investment on focusing on what you're good at versus what you're not so good at is much, much higher.
Absolutely. Love it. Shall we move on?
Yeah, let's move on. Yeah, because I've got some great examples here.
Okay.
So Don Clifton's one of the kind of forefathers of positive psychology. And, I've talked before about how we traditionally focus on what's wrong. But he kind of asked the question, well, what actually would happen if we studied, what was right with people versus that's what's wrong? And if you move on to the next one, Vanessa, I thought it was interesting. I was talking to somebody the other day, and it prompted me to dig out one of my old school reports. And this is an old school report from, when I was about 10. And it made actually a bit depressing reading, because it did just focus on all the things that I wasn't so good at. So it was like, Charlotte must focus more on her work. She needs to, think more before speaking about something. Her work's a bit untidy, or she needs to take more pride in her presentation. And there was this kind of like common theme in there. And when I thought about it, I was like, gee, how must that feel when you're constantly having the negatives pointed out? We know it in performance reviews. We've had a performance review where somebody's going, oh, well, you did that really well, but now let's spend the next 45 minutes on focusing on what you don't do so well.
Doesn't feel good.
No, exactly. It doesn't make us feel good. And I think sometimes, I know you've got kids, Vanessa, I've got kids. Sometimes we do it with our kids. Their school report comes home and we go, oh my God, that's great. You've got an A in that, but you've got a D in that. So we need to focus on that. Well, this is a shift in mindset for a lot of people to go, let's focus on what you do well. Okay, Charlotte's attention to detail. I'm 46 years old now. My attention to detail and my spelling, unfortunately, has never improved since I was 10. However, I have developed some strategies to, improve it. I try and make sure that I have somebody peer review my work, or, I'll use Grammarly or spell check or, other tools. So instead of focusing on the things I don't do well, let's focus on the things that I do well. So that, Charlotte talks too much in class. Let's find an opportunity to harness Charlotte's enthusiasm for, communication in a positive way. Charlotte rushes into things, right? Okay, well, let's find ways to help Charlotte think about how she can use that, what might be classed as impatience to others in a positive way. So, as I say, our talents and our strengths are there from a very young age, and it's how do we go about harnessing them.
Has that driven you, do you think? So your experience looking back, do you think that's shaped why you've developed yourself into this career around strength? Because obviously that what you were mentioning then around, and we were talking earlier about working under pressure, and that's not for everybody, but for you and I, we don't mind it, and we do work really well under pressure, which is a strength for us, but not a strength for you.
Yeah, that's right. So, if I share some of my strengths and kind of articulate them. So, my first one's activator, which means, I love getting things going. I love moving quickly. Yes, it can sometimes become a weakness if I let it run away with me. And I go rushing off into things, but otherwise I'm good at bringing energy and passion into things and getting things moving, especially when they get stuck. I have woo, which stands for winning others over, which means I'm really socially courageous. I love meeting new people. I'm one of these people that, you know, send me to a networking event and I'm in my element, whereas most people see that as, you know, oh my God, it's torture going to a networking event and having to talk to strangers. You know, I love that. So
I remember you telling me that the first time we met. Yeah.
A lot of people think I'm a bit weird like that, but yeah, I'm the type of person that talks to strangers on aeroplanes and in elevators and grocery stores. Then I have command, which for me, I don't have to be in command or control, but it means courage. So I have the courage to kind of challenge the status quo, ask questions that others don't. And then I have a ranger. So that's that one that likes that kind of pressure. I'm good at juggling multiple things at different times, you know, quite flexible. If the goalpost changes, that's not an issue to me, but I like juggling things and having lots going on. If I don't have enough going on, then yes, sometimes I can procrastinate and don't get much done. So I like that multiplicity. And then the positivity. So this is answering your question, that I think I've always been a very positive person, the glass half full. And I always try and see the positives in, you know, other people and positives in situations, you know, and that's a strength that I think I can bring when there's doom and gloom. I can help people see the silver lining or the possibility. And I think that's what led me to do what I do. I used to sell IT. I used to work for Verizon, the big global telco. And it sort of, I enjoyed what I did. But when I thought about helping others and helping others identify what makes them unique and how they might be able to, you know, use their natural talents, turn them into strengths, to live a more fulfilling life and live a more fulfilling career, or have a more fulfilling career versus, oh my God, I've got to work tomorrow, then yes, that's what drives me. So I think that seeing the uniqueness in everybody is, and the positive uniqueness is something that drives me.
Charlotte, is that your real report card on the screen? I'm just reading it.
Yeah, it is.
You're a beautiful soul. You're willing to share it all.
Well, yeah, and there's other stuff in there, you know, but majority of it says Charlotte needs to, you know, focus more on her handwriting and her written work. But yeah, you can tell how old it is because we had a subject called Nature and Science and Bible studies.
Isn't that gorgeous? I thought it was a stock image, and then I started reading it.
Yeah, no, that's me. And I shared some other extracts with some other people the other day, and they were like, oh my God, that's spookily scary that it looks like you. But that's the point, is it focuses on the negatives as opposed to the kind of positives. So, you know, if I can flip this around, yeah, I can see that this is probably how I was at school. And it might be my strengths getting in my way, I would say. A lot of people say to me, well, Charlotte, you know, focusing on the strengths is great, but what about our weaknesses? Invariably, our weaknesses are our strengths, you know, being overused or underused. So again, that activator might bring that passion and energy, but if I overuse it, I got the dial turned up too high, then yes, I can be, you know, impatient, bit of a, you know, bull in a china shop. And so yes, you know, Charlotte needs to have more careful thought beforehand. You know, and her written work's untidy. That was a classic sign of my activator at a young age, not being harnessed in the right way. So, you know, how do we help more people identify what those natural talents are, and not twist them, but shape them in a positive way. You know, look to use them in a positive way, as opposed to, you know, just pulling out the negative, because it's not great.
Couldn't agree more. I remember my sister said to me once, your greatest strength, you know, for me it was empathy at that point, is your greatest weakness. And I remember at that point I was like, oh my gosh, it just was so true. And when I applied that to all the other lenses of when we're coaching or training around strength, it's exactly what you said. It's absolutely 100% true.
Yeah, and knowing that is really, you know, useful. So, you know, I think a lot of the work I do is mainly with teams. So, you know, where I'm strong, you're maybe not so strong, but where you're strong, I mean, I'm not. So we find these complementary partners, you know, where I'm not great at attention to detail. I used to work with a girl who loved peer reviewing work. And she'd go, oh, give it to me, I love doing it. And she'd sort of pick it out. Well, instead of me sitting there and not being able to spot errors, you know, she would do it. So I'm playing to her strengths and she's playing to my strengths. So these are just some of the, you know, statistics. I know a lot of people like their numbers, but Gallup research, when they look at organizations all over the world and individuals all over the world have found that people are happier and people are more likely to be engaged in their jobs. And when we're thinking about it at an organizational level, if you can help people identify what their strengths are, and understand when they might get in the way, then the impacts are huge. And if you move to the next one, it talks more at that team level as well. So, teams that focus on their strengths every day have over 12.5% greater productivity. And again, profitability goes up. This is measurable stuff, because, we all think, feel and behave differently. One of the things I really love, one of the fascinating statistics, and I'm actually not a big numbers person, but one of the most fascinating statistics for me is the chances of you having the same top 5 talent themes or strengths as defined by the Clifton Strength Finder, as somebody else. So just the same top 5, because there are 34 different clusters, the same top 5, it's over 1 in 33 million. So that really goes to show how we do think, feel and behave differently. You and I might share a ranger, we might like that multiplicity of lots going on, but you're probably not going to have that that woo and positivity. We might share 1 or 2, or we might even share the same 5 but in a different order. But as I say, it goes to show how different we are.
We don't share all of them, because I'm definitely not a wooer like you. People often take me for an extrovert, but I'm very much an introvert. And when you said you struck up conversations with people on the street, that kind of made me nervous, as well as networking events, your passions for going to networking events. I'm probably in the 80% of people who really, don't love it. Put it at the top of their list each week. So that's
I can make people nervous when I sit down in an aeroplane next to them on a 24-hour flight to the UK and I start talking. Then I think I make them. Luckily, I pick up on some of the cues, especially when they put their earphones in.
Yeah. Look, numbers are great, and I think they're fantastic to share. So if you're listening today and you're not sure and you haven't adopted a strength-based approach, it does really support that psychological safety in the team as well, because people know where each other are coming from. It improves that effective communication. It helps support boundaries. The benefits, are significant. All right. So your talents create a filter.
Yeah, that's right. So when I was, you cut out a bit then, Vanessa. Sorry about that. I'm not sure if you asked me a question, but when I mentioned how our talents, which are those naturally occurring patterns of thought, feeling and behavior that turn into strengths, we're all like ropes. We have those individual kind of strands to us, and we see the world in a different way. And Gallup cluster them into, as I mentioned, we study 4 different talent or strength themes, but also the 4 different domains. How you go about getting things done, how you might influence others, how you build relationships, and how you absorb and think about data. Now, where that's like really important is if I, for instance, am an individual that wants to flex, and I'm struggling within an organization to articulate why I should flex, or I'm trying to put a business case across, then understanding what your strengths are and how you think, feel, behave, or how you go about getting stuff done is really useful. It's like, okay, how am I going to make sure that I stay disciplined when I'm off site to get stuff done? Well, to be able to articulate how you might go about doing that. Well, I'm high in focus, and therefore, I will just get this done, or I'm high in achiever. When you know what they are and you've got your unique report, you take the assessment, then it helps you articulate to others, how you'll go about getting stuff done. Or, helps you think about, well, I'm going to be influencing this person who's, very focused on the data. So therefore I need to present some data to it. Or they're a type of person that's going to rather have a one-on-one conversation. So knowing your strengths help you understand how to go about influencing other people. And especially when the whole team, get to find out what they are and how we think, feel and behave differently, then you have an easier time and an easier conversation. But also, how am I going to go about building those relationships? If I'm working independently. But not just applying for it as a manager. When I'm thinking about, I've got a team of people that do flex and what their needs might be, helping understand what those filters look like and what that person brings to the team and what it is that they need shaped through their strengths. That's a much more positive conversation and is going to have much better outcomes.
Brilliant. Sorry, I just flicked to the next slide quickly then. That was my finger slip, but sorry.
Okay. That's okay.
Anybody?
Yeah, so I think we mentioned this earlier about it's about developing your strengths and managing your weaknesses. I often say to people, when I look at my Clifton Strengths report and I can see the order of my full 34, I've got learner and input right down the bottom. Now, somebody that was high learner, loves learning, always engrossed in, learning new things. They're often wanted to take things on. Now, just because learner's at the bottom for me, that doesn't mean to say it's a weakness. I still learn, but I do it in another way. I'll do it through my activator of, sort of just diving in there and trying it out, and my positivity will go, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's try it another way. Or I like consuming podcasts when I'm on the go because it's that multiplicity of, maximizing my time. So often people will say, oh, well, I don't do this very well. That's a weakness. I must invest in that. Well, actually, manage around the things that, are your weaknesses. And we define a weakness as something that gets in the way of success. So, if my activator going rogue on me is getting in my way and becoming a weakness, I need to kind of look at how I can use that productively. But if my attention to detail is also a weakness, then what are some strategies? You're sending me on lots of courses to become better at attention to detail or better at spelling or more analytical with numbers. That's just going to drain me. So I'm much better to partner with somebody else that's going to do that. So, that's where being able to be flexible with who you partner with and not expect us to be, well-rounded individuals, but have well-rounded teams. That's how you go about doing it. Focus. The return on investment is focusing on your strengths, identifying them and focusing on them, and then managing around your weaknesses, not trying to be somebody that you're not.
Brilliant. So where do we find more information, Charlotte?
So I'm particularly passionate about the Gallup tool for identifying your strengths. So there's the link at the bottom, just Gallup Strength Center. It's probably one of the most cost-effective tools out there. Mm-hmm. They charge in US dollars, and it's like $20 to find out your top 5, and $50 if you want to find out your full 34. But there are other assessments out there. There's the VEER assessment, which is a values in action assessment, which is free. But I highly recommend the Gallup. There's also a book that some people might see, in Dillux or at the airport in the bookshops there, Strength Finder 2.0. It's been a bestseller for years. At the back of that, you get a code. But the other one I want to mention is strength-based parenting. So I know a lot of people, flex because of their role as a parent. But if you're thinking, right, I want to take the assessment and I've got kids, the most cost-effective way of doing that is buying the book Strength-Based Parenting, because at the back of the book is a code for you or perhaps your spouse to take the assessment. But you can also start talent spotting in your child, starting to spot for what their strengths might be. The section of the book that does that. There's also an assessment for children between the ages of 11 and 14 to take. Over 14, they take the normal, one that the adult would take. So when we talk about strengths not just being work applicable, it could be whole life applicable. How about focusing on your strengths as a parent? How do I be a better parent with my activator or my woo? How do I help my son who's high, competition, leverage that competition in a positive way, and not just have people point out the negatives. So they're the best ways of finding out.
All right, then if you're listening and you'd like to get in touch with Charlotte to find out more, we've got your details here. So your business is the Strength Partners.
That's right. So they can either visit us on the website, give me a ring, or send me an email. Say I work with one-on-ones, but I mainly work with teams, helping teams identify their strengths and how they might be more productive. But I also run open programs, Clifton Strengths Discovery programs, where people can just come along and, you know, spend half a day or a full day, you know, being able to identify them so that they can maybe articulate them in a job interview.
Sure.
When you are asked that question about strengths and weaknesses, you can clearly articulate and put in your own words, you know, what they are, versus going, oh, I think I'm good with, you know, with spreadsheets.
All right, so if you're interested in that, jump on Charlotte's website, thestrengthpartners.com, and register, and then you'll send out notifications of any workshops you've got coming up and things like that.
That's right.
Brilliant, thank you.
Oh, Vanessa, thanks so much for having me today. I'm always excited to talk about the other thing that I'm very passionate about, of focusing on the positives for people. So, you know, thank you for inviting me on.
Oh, you're welcome. So we hope you've enjoyed this Making Flexible Working Work workshop. If you have, please like and share with your network, and happy Flexible Working Day this year. Thank you, Charlotte.
Oh, thanks, Vanessa.
Bye.